So the question I'm going to be dealing with in this presentation is, how do discussions of the Drittes Geschlecht in Germany demonstrate the cultural obstacles to overcoming the idea of the sex-gender binary? Before we delve into this argument, we need to differentiate sex from gender. While definitions of sex point towards inborn biological characteristics which aid reproduction, gender is deemed socially constructed and independent of your biology. Though both are usually regarded dichotomous, for example, you're either male or female, the gendered binary has started to be disassembled in more recent years. However, the same can't be said for the sex binary. Historically, it's been accepted that the sex of a child dictates their gender and their gendered societal role. It is therefore important to define intersexuality and its relation to these binaries. Intersexuality is defined as an individual possessing neither wholly female nor male characteristics. An intersex individual can, for example, have variations in gonads, chromosomes, sex hormones, rather than just variations in genitalia. These variations illustrate a spectrum of sexual differences within intersexuality, which can be translated into challenging the reductionist sex bimodel. The idea of the sex-gender binary and intersexuality are crucial in understanding the relevance of the Drittes Geschlecht. The Drittes Geschlecht refers to the ruling in 2017 and subsequent law which declared that intersex adults should have the right to legally register as a third gender. My argument is that the sex-gender binary maintains the heteropatriarchy. Society thus must classify intersexuality as ein Tabuthema in order to uphold these binaries and subsequent power structures. As Judith Butler writes, human societies begin with gender and impose it on human bodies as sex. Patriarchal interpretations of gender are enforced on human subjects in the form of sex to perpetuate this social order. Therefore, intersexuality is dismissed with the same post-structuralist thought that accompanies discussions surrounding sex as a spectrum. So, the first cultural obstacle I'm going to address is the lack of understanding regarding intersexuality. Despite the emergence of big cases concerning the rights of intersex individuals, intersexuality tends to be referred to as an unsichtbar issue, as reflected by its general absence and indication of public unawareness when spoken about in the media. This paradoxically remains the case even though there were roughly 160,000 intersex individuals living in Germany in 2017. Prejudice forces many intersex individuals to conform to their assigned sex rather than legally identify with a more appropriate third gender category. After searching the term intersexuality on the internet, I noticed how headlines from different magazines emphasize the uncharted nature of intersexuality in public discourse. Since the Drittes Geschlecht emerged in 2017, there has been an outbreak of curiosity regarding the implications of the law, especially due to general unawareness of what intersexuality is. Yet these headlines echoing the questions Germans may have somewhat fetishize intersexuality and reinforce the portrayal of intersex individuals as the other due to variations in their sexual makeup. This is consolidated by the increase in web searches of intersexueller Menschen Genitalien in Germany at the beginning of November 2017, most likely triggered by the court ruling that same November. This indicates public fascination with the abnormal sexual characteristics of intersex individuals. Additionally, intersexuality has been regarded as a disease, with discriminatory connotations, a disease that apparently needs to be cured. Though the classifications have gradually become less ill-worded due to pressure from LGBTI movements, it is still referred to as disorders or differences of sex development, and treatment forces individuals to align with either female or male sex. This is usually carried out through controversial yet legal medical interventions on infants, who are incapable of giving informed consent, and their parents are usually provided with little information about the procedure. The emphasis is on the need to normalise the child so that they can comply with the socially accepted sex bimodel. Even though these surgeries have traumatic physical and psychological consequences, Germany is yet to take action and in fact aids this treatment through state funding. This portrays the surgeries as a healthcare issue of necessity. Ironically though, there is no state funding for consequential psychological treatment and no real way to seek compensation. Discussions surrounding these surgeries are starting to enter the public sphere due to big organisations branding these surgeries Western genital mutilation. But in the meantime, typical forms of intersex genital mutilation are carried out around 1,700 times a year with no end in sight. Germany refuses to release data on procedures, claiming there are privacy concerns, which in fact demonstrates their desire to uphold the unsichtbar nature of not only the interventions, but also the topic of intersexuality as a whole. Judging this information, and based on the quote on the screen right now, it seems as if Germany wanted the Drittes Geschlecht to deflect from the ongoing violation of intersex individuals. The public unawareness corresponds to the lack of legal action. The next cultural obstacle I'm going to look at is the desire to allocate everybody a sex in society. Society has been structured for centuries on a heteronormative basis to cater for only two sexes. There were discussions around creating unisex toilets in Bavarian schools at the beginning of 2019 for children who identify as trans, intersex and non-binary. Though this appears to mark progress overcoming the sex-gender binary, categorising toilets as male, female and then diverse strengthens this binary by re-establishing that female and male are the norm and reiterating a collective other. This shows an unappreciation for the sex-gender spectrum and misrepresents intersexuality as a gender identity or sexual orientation. This means that the issue of intersexuality will never be adequately addressed. The idea of misrepresentation can be seen when we look closer at the 2018 law, which states that examinations and a medical diagnosis of an intersex condition is required. This may deter already traumatised intersex individuals, meaning that they continue to legally comply with the binary classifications of sex. This removes intersex individuals' rights to self-determine, as an authority still dictates an individual's sex and identity. A real way of subverting the sex binary would have been through the alternative recommendation, the elimination of sex-gender registration altogether. This, however, was opposed in the Bundestag, indicating a bias towards the sex binary and a facade of LGBTI progress. This desire to allocate a sex to humans can most prominently be seen in the aforementioned use of infant medical interventions in Germany. Judith Butler argues that a doctor has the authority to impose their preconceptions about gender when awarding a sex to a baby. Even though it can be argued that the doctor makes a biological observation, Barbara Rogroth claims that biology and culture are not independent. See the reductionist approach to sex assignment for the sake of appeasing heteronormative demands. Christiane Wörling was the first intersex individual in Germany to gain compensation after being allocated a male sex at birth despite the presence of female sexual characteristics. In her book, she speaks about how her body was medically manipulated to appear male, which encapsulates how doctors alter certain characteristics to disregard intersexuality. Her experience acts as a microcosm of those who feel alienated from their assigned sex and points towards the condition gender dysphoria. However, this condition can be difficult to apply to intersex individuals, as they never possessed a binary sex and therefore do not feel like they should have been born the other. Yet this idea conveys how sex-gender identity is determined in the brain. Doctors are manipulating nature to create artificial sex rather than embracing non-binary biological variations of sex. The last cultural obstacle I'm going to look at is the growing far right-wing landscape in Germany. The LGBT organisation evaluated the political parties' stances on LGBTI issues in the 2017 election. The AfD, in contrast to post-materialist parties, were not responsive to any LGBTI issues, let alone intersex rights. This is very alarming considering their growing support. They received 12.6% of the vote in 2017. Alice Weidel proclaimed the recommendation for the Drittes Geschlecht ridiculous. This statement comes as no surprise considering the party's strong rejection of progressive thought regarding gender. They support the sex-gender binary, claiming any opposition to this is genderwahn. Her criticism of the judicial branch illuminates how the legislative branch is dominated by far right-wing thought regarding gender and sex, and it would not have autonomously implemented this law if it wasn't for external pressure. This, however, seems bizarre considering Germany has the biggest LGBTI population in Europe. LGBTI attacks can potentially be traced back to the growing far right-wing movement in Germany. This means that sexual minorities are being continually marginalised, and any attempts to overcome the sex-gender binary are being dismissed and attacked. As you can see on the screen, I have now concluded with a summary of why it is so difficult to overcome the sex-gender binary in German society.